Thank you to all joining us today. Thank you to the Stanford Healthcare Innovation Lab for having me. Good evening from New York. Good afternoon if you're on the West Coast, or good morning if you're watching us from Europe. My name is Alex, as Kushan said, and today I'm going to be talking about XR in medicine in the era of precision medicine. We're going to be talking about the work that we have been doing at Weill Cornell Medicine on the field of XR. And there's going to be a lot of stuff to show you, but towards the end, I'd love to hear your feedback, so feel free to engage. So we're going to be talking about XR. XR is essentially a union of augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, all of the above. And while we're diving into, just to break the jargon, we're going to also talk about precision medicine, what precision medicine is. So to try to give a very simple definition, but kind of vague, it is, to me at least, the right treatment for the right person at the right time. So a lot of things have to happen right in order to get precision medicine or precision health, depending on how you want to name it. And the key thing is essentially where big data meets medicine, and data-informed decisions help us create a treatment, tailored treatment options for our patients. So the moral compass of why we do this with precision medicine is key for us to define before we start. And I want to start with a simple story. One of our patients that is now a cancer survivor, Irene Price, that has gone publicly, I can share her details. She was diagnosed many years ago with bladder cancer, went into chemotherapy, followed standard of care, then went into relapse. And you can see a little bit of her history. Essentially what happened was she was ready to call it quits when she went to her clinician, Dr. Nanas, and she recommended her try precision medicine. So we analyzed her genome, found that she had a specific gene altered, specifically a HER2 amplification that is most commonly found in breast cancer. And there was a breast cancer drug, FDA approved, that was targeting that. That drug was Herceptin. So she went through a chemo cycle of 8 cycles of Taxol and Herceptin, and since 2014 stays disease-free, and that makes her a survivor. And cases like Irene are what motivates us to do more in medicine, what helps demonstrate the impact that precision medicine can have. This is another case with Dr. Holcomb and Rhonda Cuddlechuck. She had uterine cancer, was also treated, had also had an HER2 amplification, and is now recovering and is waiting a couple more years to be called a survivor. So that, to me, is the epicenter of why we do things in precision medicine. What is our focus? It is towards translational care, to make discoveries, to improve our healthcare for our patients. Now, going to understand a little bit the XR space. On the left-hand side, we have the real environment, and on the opposite side, we have the complete kind of artificial virtual environment. And there are different terminologies that we're going to be using. Don't get too worried about the lingo or the vocabulary. The most important part is to see how digital information can come to the real world and present. So we're going to be seeing different forms of projects, that some would be augmented virtuality, augmented reality. Let's not get tangled in words. Think of all that umbrella term, that XR, that captures all that space. So we talked about precision medicine, but why do we use XR? These are some of the projects that we're doing at Weill. We're using it to understand big data. So on the left-hand side, you see me and one of our students, Sophia, working with protein structure. So this is on proteomics. So we understand it. We use big data and XR to understand better proteomics and how they are in space. On the right-hand side, you can see networks. This is a cancer gene drug network on the top right that you can click and get more information from FDA. And on the bottom right, there is transcriptomic data. These are individual cells that have been analyzed, and I can walk through them in real life and use artificial intelligence and voice to better understand and have them light up based on the queries that I'm posing. So today, the hope is that I could walk you and give you a glimpse of some of these projects that we have been working on and we're passionate about. And towards the second part of my talk, I will be talking a little bit about pilots and how this COVID pandemic asked us to shift scope. So I'm going to show you a little bit of work that we did before the pandemic and how work has shifted to apply XR in translational healthcare. So we're going to be talking first about whole graph, a tool that helps us visualize and creates networks between cancer genes. These are the little red dots that you see over there, and drugs, the little pill-shaped green sphere-like objects. And to really understand how we got to that, we'll start simple. One of the problems that we have in both computer science and in medicine and other fields is visualizing networks. And what you can see here is a very complex set of nodes and edges and all of that information. I think the information on the right is representing Java and its libraries and all of that, but you really have to zoom in to understand anything out of it. So the problem has always been how we can visualize that data, that networks. Now, to bring the medical context into that, and more specifically, a cancer drug network, this is how it would look. So we would have these rhombus-shaped objects that would be the drugs, dexamethasone, naproxen, etc. We would have the genes that would be relayed and shaped based on how their values are represented. We would have also transcription factors that you see here in the middle called ERG. And one of the things that we wanted to find with Caitlin was how do we visualize that? How do we do it in a way that clearly communicates the idea with our oncologists or people that are driving the treatment options? And as we started going into the journey, we started experimenting about what we could do with mixed reality. So as you see in this demo, we started playing with physics and interacting the real world with the physical space and kind of bending the rules. And one of the things that you will see, I'm using some voice commands, and we're spawning this network, and then we're telling it to have gravity and fall on, and it rolls out on the floor. So we started understanding what are the boundaries of that mixed space of bringing that digital information on our own terms. And as we did that, a lot of the things that we would be able to point and see if we were in real life all together and not virtually via Google Meet, we would point at a reference of a particular object sometimes when we're brainstorming. And we wanted to bring that kind of the same experience with people, whether they are in the same room, to have the actual same reference point of a digital object. So here, what we're doing a test with Sophia is essentially holding a specific drug and visualizing and understanding in the early days if what I'm pointing at is where she's looking at as well. So from that, as the application started maturing, we wanted to bring this to what we call our tumor boards. And our tumor boards are, think of this as round table discussions where we put together the collective minds of our surgeons, our oncologists, our pathologists, our bioinformaticians, with one simple focus. There is a patient case being discussed, and we're trying to find all the possible options that we have in our arsenal that we can improve for our patients. And we decided to break a little bit the geographic boundaries, and Cornell, which is based in Ithaca, Weill Cornell is based here in New York, the medical campus, but we also have a medical campus at the other side of the world in Qatar. So we wanted to bring the collective minds of people across time zones. And we decided to do this kind of project. Really,
and I don't know, I see already Carson logged in. Carson, can you unmute? So Carson is joining us from Cornell, Qatar, and I think he's just looking at his laptop at this point. And so join me. And what you see? Yeah.
Yes, I can hear.
So obviously you're going to see a lot of technology coming through, and we're still plagued by the same things that we were plagued this earlier today, like Zoom bombing, trouble with the microphone, and all of that. But all of that is moving and is improving. So initially, we saw Carson show her, one of the professors here at Qatar with an expertise on metabolomics, remoting and connecting in physical presence or virtually represented as an avatar, like a red head in our space, and being able to contribute. And here we see similar networks to the cancer drug networks. This is a metabolic network. And here we see the avatars where they're looking, where they're pointing, and you see these glowing kind of things that help us kind of collaborate together. So holograph, just to wrap it up, is our first kind of experiment of how scientists and clinicians could collaborate together to ideate, to brainstorm, to try to, in a way, play pool of how we can knock out a specific gene that has a mutation that is causing cancer through a specific drug. And what you see here with Caitlin, Neil, and Olivia is trying to play that scientific pool, trying to knock out that genes and better understand what is the driver of that specific disease. Now, switching to another project of visualizing proteins. Given time, I will be going a little faster on this one. Similar to the Cancer Gene Drug Network, we had a similar problem on at Cornell that we wanted to bring that value of the reports of what we would see of a particular gene. So, for example, here we have a gene EGFR. It is prevalent on glioblastoma cases, and that is brain cancer and also lung cancer. And what we see here in the report that's been identified is that there has been a simple letter on the DNA codebook of these 3.2 billion letters, changing from a G, a guanine, to an adenine, to A. So this causes an amino acid change that happens at position 289 from A to T. So it changes from alanine to threonine, and that's what's causing this part. So an oncologist would look at that report and they would say, okay, so what do we do? One thing that we see, we visualize these in a cancer genomics portal that visualizes a myriad of cases. And what we could tell about this particular mutation is that it occurs multiple times, also known as a hotspot. And the good thing about that hotspot is there is an FDA-approved drug for it. It's called gefitinib, and it's a great target. But the challenge of what we are seeing here, it's a one-dimensional data set. You only see these plotted across the x-axis, and the y-axis, the second dimension, just brings the occurrence. So we thought that we could do this a little better back in the day, and this is me trying to play Minority Report and try to, this is called augmented virtuality because I'm bringing my real hands and the ripples of the shirt and all of that. And what I'm trying to do is essentially manipulate this protein structure and, click on a virtual button, see all the amino acid representation, switch to a secondary, tertiary structure, and try to do that Minority Report kind of thing to better understand the data. And as I'm going through that and you see all these different colors, each triplet, each amino acid represents a color, then I'm going to these hotspots, the same thing that we were showing before. And now I'm going to focus only on the mutation that this person had, that little red thing that marks the spot, and have that visual information right next to me that tells me what this is, what's the driver, what does the molecular pathologist say about this, what does literature say about this, what should we do? So trying to put all the data together, we were combining the digital information, the three-dimensionality of that as the protein structure coils, and we wanted to do these experiments to see how they interact in real space. Do they bend with the rules? Do they play nice? Do they hide behind the cubicle and things like that? And one of the things that we started doing is also experimenting with our precision medicine knowledge base, where we store over 7,700 clinical grade interpretations of what it is. So XR was the visual tool. We needed a way to augment the capabilities of what the oncologist could do. So we added AI and we added voice. And this is one example. Tell me more about breast cancer.
Found 30 interpretations associated with tell me more about breast cancer.
Tell me more about EGFR mutations in brain glioblastoma.
Found 14 interpretations associated with tell me more about EGFR mutations in brain glioblastoma.
So one of the interesting things that is happening here is the AI tool that we built was trained to understand medical terminology. So the names of the genes, like EGFR is how you would spell it. The most prevalent breast cancer gene is called BRCA1, and it's spelled BRCA1. And the interesting thing was, how do you make this terminology like glioblastoma that we wouldn't use on a typical like shopping list, like get cheese, get milk, and get glioblastoma? How do we make AI understand the terminology, play nice, and and understand all the different accents and all the different terminology. So we used a lot of big data, we used a lot of language understanding, a lot of NLP, a lot of training with our clinicians to achieve that. And the end result is a way that I could visualize that protein structure, and I can query, I can interrogate in real life, and I could say, tell me more about that specific part, and I can learn about the cases, and I can link to the clinical cases that are available right now. And the link that you see there is where you can go and find more, and you can even try that PNKB website that we have that is open and free for everyone to try. Now, in the interest of time, I'll be going through some other examples a little faster. So this is an example that we call STORE that is using deep learning to assess the selection of human blastocysts in IVF and whether they would lead to successful pregnancy or not. So we implemented a method of hundreds of thousands of embryos that we trained, and because precision medicine is not just about cancer, but essentially think of this like a drag and drop that the embryologist would do, and it would assess whether that embryo would be good for implantation. And this is only one part of the problem, like to get a query and get data right away. That is the XR equivalent, to be able to shrink yourself into the size of the embryo, being able to visualize it and start playing with different layers and start playing with a different time point. So this actually is a 4-dimensional data set because it is a time lapse. So an embryo is a 3-dimensional object, and we're capturing this across time. So I can go to different cell stages of embryonic development as the cells divide and go there and go to these, interesting points in time, like you're skimming on a YouTube video, to try to find the interesting part and change the layers and visualize the data and have the AI on the back end helping me and say, yep, that's a good embryo, or no, that's not it, or I don't really know, so you should really help me through it, and I will learn as you classify these embryos. So these are some of our experiences to try to better help medicine in a translational manner. Now, this project, the fourth and last one for this before we switch to the COVID-related projects, is called MR Lab. And as we were building these computational tools, the wet lab, the people that do all the extractions and the pipetting and all of that, got wind of that we had all these cool toys and wanted to solve a problem. And one of the most tricky problems, if you've ever been on a wet lab, you see me here wearing gloves, is they have to capture the physical experiment and the digital version of it, the experiment, and all of these are separated. What do I mean? They're holding samples that are potentially biohazard, and as they are processing blood, they have to take their gloves off, type something into the computer, then glove up again and do something else. So it is very disruptive to do both the digital and the physical at the same time. And we thought that we could do a little better with technologies like mixed reality. And we decided to solve these 3 problems. How do you accession samples? How do you process them? And how do you store them? And these are 3 simple videos of what we were doing. So we imagine like scanning something and immediately getting its digital information. So that would be, for example, a lab requisition that would have all the samples of a particular patient, and we would scan that. That's obviously a fake patient, like John Doe, and we would scan and see and confirm that this is indeed the right person. They haven't put it in a wrong box, and we would check the samples and everything. Then when we decided to process these samples, so this is an instrument called a centrifuge. You put on blood tubes there, and it separates the red blood cells and the white blood cells by using a centrifugal force. So the idea of this is, what if I could just put the samples on the instrument, hit go, and it just happened. I don't have to go to my Excel spreadsheet and capture and scan all of them. And this is exactly what we did. So as we were playing more and more of that, a lot of people in the lab, they say, I like this kind of superpowers. What if I could be like Superman and I could see what's inside these freezers before we open them? So just to know, you might have heard of these with the pandemic. These are the -80, like deep freezers that even the vaccines are stored. We wanted to see, like when you open, it's not like your typical fridge. It doesn't have milk or cheese and stuff. It has it's like thousands of samples, and they're all tightly packed. And the moment that you open the door, the temperature rises. And like a minute later, the alarm starts beeping, and you have to close again because you're probably storing DNA or RNA that are very unstable. So the ability of knowing before I open where there is space and where I should store would save the lab valuable time not looking around, but it also would ensure the safety of the samples. So as we were going through that and we started going into the pandemic, one of the things that we wanted to do is to use it for training. So this is a workflow. Like, I don't know how many of you are in a wet lab or have used the Centrifuge. This is the manual of how you would do it. So you would scan a QR, you would look at this, and this would tell you, like, you have to put it in the outlet, like that one, done. And then you have to flick the switch, okay. And then you have to, like, it's like step by step by step, how do you do this? And this is David that is gonna check me. I'm like a very a novice person in the lab. I'm not doing wet lab preparation, and usually I fumble around and I'm dangerous there. So I stay on the dry side of things in the analysis, but this is telling all the different settings that I should have that I could check, and you could see the images, but it could also tell me, like, I'm gonna show you a little more and then I'm gonna skip, like I have to press the button that unlatches the centrifuge, and then I really have to do it like this, and then it tells me how to put the caps and everything. This was a much, much more convenient way of training people, and it was a lot easier to do this during COVID, where social distancing was a key factor, especially in research. And the challenge with research is, like, you cannot really shut down the labs because cancer doesn't stop. So you need to continue to do that. So finding a way of being, and here I'm obviously doing it wrong, so I'll probably have to look at the video and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And I'm checking and I'm going back and, yep, that's how I did it, and I'm going to the next steps. So this was some of the work that we published at AMP in 2019, how this would work in a lab. And in 2020, when the pandemic really took off, we started thinking of ways that remote assistance, training, and how we could use these XR devices as a way to reduce BP, to increase social distancing, and increase the safety, but also the productivity of our team. So starting in 2020, we have been using these devices, and the lab doesn't want to go back to the without the device thing. They're like having these superpowers and they want to use these tools. And trying to explain to someone, like in the pre-pandemic thing, what is augmented reality and how does it work? We use these kind of posters that this is like plain paper, but we would use like a device like an iPad that we would show, and we would show these videos. And here you can see us showing off and how we can present protein structures moving around, et cetera, just to help people understand without wearing a headset, how does that look? So that is MR Lab. And this is all the projects that I had to show you. I'm gonna briefly show you some of the pilots that we did, and I'm gonna switch then to like a Q&A, because I really wanna get your feedback of what do you think and answer all the questions that you may have. So to anyone that was in a coma for the last 2 years or so, COVID hit us and we had to change. And one of the first calls that we got was from the ICU. So one of the biggest challenges that we had was at the start of the disease, we didn't know exactly what we were dealing with. It was like a very new kind of aspect, and we needed to increase our productivity. So one of the biggest challenges was how to get remotely clinicians that were experts on the spot to give us feedback, where we really needed that expertise, and people were getting sick. So you can imagine one of our clinicians being COVID positive, they cannot be in the room, but they're the de facto expert. So they're not sick enough to be in bed, but they're sick enough not to be around us. So we wanted to continue that kind of knowledge and not lose our most impactful people. And we had one case of a clinician who was an ARDS expert. ARDS is acute respiratory distress syndrome, or one of the extreme cases of COVID that people would experience, and the lungs would collapse and they would fill with fluid. So Dr. Plataki was the de facto ARDS expert. She didn't get COVID, she had a broken leg. And you cannot walk, you know, with a wheelchair in an ICU. That doesn't work. You have to be like a SWAT team and jump straight in and help. So David gave me a call and he said, great, I like your work. Can we deploy this tomorrow at Lower Manhattan Hospital? We did, and started doing some tests of how we could do this, kind of similar to how we had this Google Meet. The difference would be that we would use sensitive information, so that would have to be HIPAA compliant and protect the privacy of our patients, which it did, and allow us to remote in and save PPE and allow an expert to go and do rounds to multiple different ICU units. So with David and Cynthia here, we started doing some tests. The most interesting one was these devices had these noise canceling microphones, and sometimes when you go on a call and you're passing by the street and really picks up these high-pitched sounds, imagine how many high-pitched sounds are in the ICU. Everything is beeping. So trying to get on like a Zoom or a Google Meet is really painful for the person on the other side of the line. It's not that everybody's screaming, it's like everything is beeping, so you cannot really focus. And these devices actually muted all these ambient noise and allowed us to communicate and be effective to it and present data, like present literature as it was coming hot off the press when we were trying to figure out how to best protect our patients. So tons of benefits, as I said, conserving PPE, protecting our patients, protecting our faculty, our staff, and more importantly, making us more productive at a pandemic where we really needed all the help that we could get. So Maya was in Queens, David was in LMH, a whole team, was on top. Dr. Platag, as I said, Maria was trying to zoom in from her home, trying to get all in these different clinics, and there's still ongoing a lot of interesting work on that will come. It was like, to me, the first effective way that we used XR, not as a research project, but like as a, we need this right now. So similar to this, once we got involved, we decided to take it to the clinic, more specifically to the oncology clinic. And here we see Dr. Andreopoulou. She's the director of our breast cancer research program. So Eleni is doing rounds with her patients, and they've come to do their chemo. And as I said, cancer doesn't stop. Like, can you imagine you're immunocompromised, you have cancer, you have to do your chemo, you're coming to the hospital in the middle of the pandemic, and the least thing that we want to do is get you sick. So the priority there was, how do we protect our patients even more, and how do we decongest the room? So what we did is we took everyone that didn't need to be in the room virtual, but we didn't remove them from the equation. So Jinian, as you can see here, she's remote from her home, showcasing to Dr. Andreopoulou all the EMR for each of her patients. So as she's doing rounds and going to patient A, to patient B, patient C, all the medical records follow her. She says, call Dr. Blah, blah, like a surgeon pops up, a radiologist, etc. And one of the interesting things that we did is we gave devices to the patients as well to participate in that care. We wanted not to alienate them, but to know that the whole team is there for them. And the reason why they're not there today is not to protect our staff, is to protect them, because they're the most vulnerable immunocompromised people that we wanted to protect. So you see here Eleni talking with breast cancer patients, and really the benefits are very similar to the ICU, but the collaborative part, the ability to have everyone on the call, I don't think it has been tried before in like a live setting. Like, yes, everybody has been on a Zoom or on a Google Meet, but like while you're doing rounds, at least for us, it was the first time that we would experience. And it wasn't just Dr. Andreopoulou, Dr. Kanner, Dr. Monge, the whole oncology team stepped in and said, I want to try it. I want to see it for both inpatients, outpatients, and try to give an opportunity for us to evaluate how this could benefit oncology in doing rounds. So Dr. Senneberg was a huge advocate. She did remarkable work on helping us better understand and stay in focus. A lot of people through here helped. Now, going and switching to other pilots in the lab, because you're going to hear also all the crazy stuff that we did in the lab. So I talked about remote collaboration. Here you see Dr. Martin growing what is called an organoid, or a cell culture, a 3D cell culture that bears the same DNA as the patient. So it's like you see it in sci-fi movies. You grow a mini you version or a mini organ, and we would take it then to our high throughput drug screening platform to drug test and see which drug is very effective for this person's DNA. And then we would go translation and apply it to a patient, knowing that this would be effective. And during the pandemic, I believe Dr. Martin grew lung organoids that we then infected with COVID, and then we were trying to brute force to find drugs that could build an answer. So one of the key things that Laura needed is a way to work during the pandemic and have her team. If you remember, social distancing, many people in the research. So how do you juggle like spearheading something completely new with half of the lab being remote? So we use these kind of devices to be able to have everyone to review as the cells grow together to kind of discuss and see, what do we do? Do we keep that cell line? Do we skip and go to the next one? How should we deal, and so on? So a lot of people were involved on these remote collaboration in the lab. And sometimes it was just very rudimentary, just to do the experiments or follow up where someone had something. Like I would call someone and I would say, hey, Laura, where did you put these consumables? And I would walk around the lab and she would guide me and put virtual pointers with augmented reality. And I would say, there it is. So the key impact of that is saving time. Like you call someone on the FaceTime and say, like, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? That's exactly what we were trying to do. The difference is I didn't have to have anything handheld. I had it on my head and all the windows were following me and I could pin them where I needed. So these are some of the pivotal people that were on that. And now something different. So one of the challenges with these XR devices, since a lot of you have tried it, how many of you would try it given the pandemic? You would say like, yeah, it's fine. I can see it from here, right? Like you would be kind of like, does this get me COVID? Or so many people might not have thought of this. We would just call it gross before the pandemic. Now we call it like, let's make sure that we're not getting infected. So one of the things that we did at the Institute, we got like HoloLenses, Quests, Magic Leaps, like all these kind of headsets. And we infected them, not with COVID. We didn't want to start a new pandemic. We used the inactive RNA version of that. So genetically, it's as close to COVID as you can get, but you cannot get sick. And we put it in the lenses, in the forehead, and the rubber. Like we started infecting these for one specific reason. We wanted to see which methods were more effective. So if you've ever done these PCR tests that they put something in like a nose swab and it's like called the brain tickler, this is the kind of testing that we did. So we tried to see what was in different time points, the residue in the virus, and see which methods like UV, ozone treatment, alcohol wipes, the works was more effective. And there's a lot of interesting results that we're planning to publish really soon. This with Olivia, with Chris, with Andrea and Craig. And it was like a very different kind of project that I would think I would be doing during the pandemic. A lot of other stuff in pathology, and how we would process tissue, and how we would have our fellows participate and have our senior faculty instruct them and still keep social distancing, and a lot of key people behind. And I want to close with a couple of other things on the pure dry lab, the computational stuff. So as we were doing this, we started finding different ways to meet because we now had a lot of different devices and we wanted to brainstorm. And we were all in New York at the given time, but we were not in the same room. So a lot of the cool stuff did not apply of brainstorming. So with Andrea and Olivia, we started doing these kind of projects and we started meeting virtually. And we started involving also Carson from Qatar on these. So we jumped in these platforms. Here we were essentially doing a mutation on a particular gene. We're changing something. And I think someone is also taking selfies during that video, but we were discussing about a particular part. I think he was trying to take a snapshot of what Carson was manipulating. And that takes us to, how does the future work? Like given the pandemic, what's the silver lining? Where can we go from that? And this is a discussion that we had with Gadi Swartz that has this show, the overview, and if you want, you can go and watch the video. We met actually in virtual space, and Gadi was in California, we were in New York, Carson was like in Doha in Qatar, different time zones, and we started collaborating and talking about projects. So think of like completely different ways where XR in healthcare can help us brainstorm and innovate. So closing with that, I want to show you some of the things that really represent where we're going with Cornell. And I want to close it with a call to action for you guys and then talk about questions. So right before the pandemic, Zuckerberg, in Oculus conference took the stage and said, the Oculus is the next computing platform. And usually when I go to these venues and people are, bragging how their product is going to be the next big thing, I hold a very small basket. But when COVID came, it really surprised me of how close was that next computing platform and how close we were to actually adopting it and using it right away. And the silver lining of COVID and where it took us is it really helped us understand how we can change medicine and the key role that XR can play in healthcare. And with that, I want to close with a video and then, before I close to the video, I want to acknowledge all the people in the lab that helped us achieve that. So these are all our students that work tirelessly on the projects, and they deserve equal credit. They've done a remarkable work. These are all the people that have interned with us, that have obviously put their hours to troubleshoot these XR devices. It's really a new form, and everyone who's really developed something on that knows the growing pains. It's a new white canvas of what you can build, and it takes a lot of work for the team to do it. It takes, a village, and I'm very fortunate to have had great mentorship through this journey, through Olivia, through Andrea, through Harel, but also having and being very close to a team that works very obviously and very critical thinking, putting us to second guess ourselves and make us improve and push the boundaries. So I'm closing with a video, and then we'll be opening up for questions.
The ability to really help people, it's what wakes me up every day and makes me excited to be at Weill Cornell Medicine.
The top minds of the world come here.
We're leaders in brain health, cardiac health, women's health, cancer, you name it.
We're changing medicine. I see it every day.
We're uniquely positioned to harness the treasure trove of expertise that we have.
Taking discoveries from the bench and bringing them to the bedside or to the patient.
This is the pivot to the future. With radical collaborations, we bring together our researchers from across Cornell to solve these big, complicated problems.
We have this corridor of science.
We collaborate with Memorial Sloan Kettering, New York Presbyterian Hospital, and Rockefeller University.
We are large enough to create a critical mass, but small enough to react to novel discoveries.
There's a vibrancy and energy to push, to innovate, to discover.
By advancing patient care, finding cures, and teaching,
we can come up with the ideas that are going to help people live longer and live a better life.
Cardiothoracic surgery, the knowledge that we're gaining is just off the charts. 98 to 99% of all the patients we operate on, we get them home better than when they came in today's environment. Any number of my past relatives would probably still be around.
In neuroscience, we have been able to develop the next generation treatments that can lift someone out of depression within 5 to 7 days.
COVID-19 came on the scene and we had a tidal wave of infections, but we were prepared to jump in.
Weill Cornell set the standard for what the care should be, and we told the world.
And we're vaccinating the population with technology that didn't even exist 10 years ago.
That's the way medicine has changed. It's through research, rigorous research.
We are Weill Cornell Medicine.
And we are changing medicine.
We're changing medicine.
Change it with us.
And here's where you can find more of these stories and how to join us. But try to do a shameless plug to talk about my lab, to talk about the work that we want. We want people like you, people that have tuned in on your evening to try to learn more. We want the greatest and the people who want to focus and to help us solve these problems. And currently my lab and our team is actively hiring. We're actively hiring in AI. We're actively hiring in software engineering. We're actively hiring in XR. The position will open soon. So if you're interested in healthcare or calling, shoot us an email, reach out, scan the QR codes, let us know, drop a comment, and I'd love to open for questions. And thank you for having me.
Alex, on behalf of the team, I just wanted to thank you for being here with us today. We really enjoyed that conversation. I think you opened our eyes to a lot of things that are being developed in the XR field that many of us, I think, were unaware of until your presentation today. So thank you. I'd like to open the floor for comments. And what we're going to do is we're going to have participants raise their hand in queue. I'll post the emoji here. If you can just copy and paste. I know we have a couple question chat, so I'll go ahead and start with those. But I'd like to encourage everyone to put their video on, unmute their mic. If you're not feeling camera ready, just go ahead and unmute. We'd love to have an interactive conversation for those that can stay with us here. So I'll start with the first question. I believe it was from Pankaj. He asked could you use this technology for drug design, such as for docking ligands to the targets?
Yes, that's actually one of the things that we're using. So one of the tools that you saw that we were using, some of it is ours and some of it is using platforms. So the one that I was showing with doing the mutations, that's a tool called Nanome that allows you to do docking and a lot of very interesting tools. So if you talk to Steve and the team at Nanome, they're doing remarkable things. To reach out to them. And to answer another comment that Chris had about the Dynamics 365 guides, yes, good eye. The tools that you saw, not the MR lab, but how we use the what's called the SOPs that you saw the video. It is indeed Dynamics 365 guides. We worked with Microsoft during the pandemic. They sent us a ton of their devices during the pandemic. They stepped in and we have a great collaboration, and we said, how can you help us? You know, we had only a slew of HoloLens 2 devices that were just launching at the beginning of the pandemic. So whatever devices they had, they shipped them, and we worked together on creating a curriculum in 365 guides and integrating it with ACE. Any other questions? Jennifer, would you want to pick one, or should I go through the list? What do you prefer? Or if people have questions, they could go also live on camera and let us know, right?
Yeah, it looks like we don't have anyone in queue. So Steve, I know you had a question. You're welcome to unmute yourself if you'd like and ask it. Otherwise, I can ask that one to start. I can go ahead and step in here. It looks like he was asking about if you think that the glasses are possible to wear for a long time. He was curious if that seemed like a realistic possibility.
So this is an actual problem that we wanted to address, and been fortunate to be for close to a decade where the glasses of that sort were really, really hurting your eyes, and I would feel nauseated and I would want to throw up. Fast forward to today, especially with devices like HoloLens, because they don't have video pass through and they just show a virtual object in real space. You know, you look around and it's not there. It actually is a much better experience. Now, comparing devices, and again, I don't want to either endorse or non-endorse a product, but the latest HoloLens that I use, the interesting thing, it's only 3 grams more heavier or lighter than its predecessor, but the weight distribution and how these more modern devices are dealing with ergonomics is really interesting of how it makes it comparable. So I would say more and more tools are becoming, and the headsets are becoming cheaper, are becoming better, and are becoming more useful to do it and use it, you know, throughout our days. But what I would say for the ICUs, not only did they use it throughout the lifetime of the battery, but we had also battery packs so they would never run out. So they definitely didn't report any dizziness or, you know, fatigue or anything that would come from that. But it's still too early to tell, and you have to really open your range to really understand, you know, whether it could cause long-term fatigue and all of that. But it's something that we really, really want to better understand to know, like, effects and how it could be used as a tool.
Okay, I think Justin in the chat, he has a question. He just raised his hand. So would you want to speak to Alex directly, Justin?
Yeah, thank you so much for presenting. Do you have any plans or ongoing projects to extend this XR technology to the clinical setting so that, for example, a surgeon could visualize a certain area or organ in the body during a robotic surgery and control it through XR in real time?
Yes. So yes to your answer, like, do we have something that is in the works? Yes. And actually a really great tool that the previous presenter showed, the Medivis company are doing great things on that they went public. So Wenbo was actually talking about this. And I had this very specific question, like exactly what you said, Justin. Is it ready for prime time? Is it ready to be used in clinic? And I would say, just because of my interest in medical surgery, and more specifically robotic surgery, which was my field of expertise, the level of accuracy that you need, surgery is like the holy grail, to do a live surgery with sub-millimeter accuracy. Like the HoloLens or any HoloLens of these devices are great. Would you do some tomorrow? And I think the answer to that every time I go to a surgeon that's equally excited, like, no. And I'm like, okay, let's say it had all the problems addressed. It had the sub-millimeter accuracy, the registration, all the technical difficulties addressed. Would you still use it? And sometimes they still say no. And I'm trying to understand, what is that factor? And I think the factor is showing that equivalency and starting with baby steps until you climb that mountain. But if I were to say that surgery would be the holy grail of XR, of how you could visualize, let's say, where the cancer is, and you would take the scalpel or and cut through where the X is, there are so many components, so many disease groups that can be tackled with the devices, not having to be that super accurate. I wouldn't want to have a device that could probably fail or do updates or overheat, or I would feel dizzy. I would want it to be, think of it like a clinical perspective. It has to work 100% of the time. No excuses, not 99%, 100% of the time, never fail. Like, it has to be equivalent to how we use a stethoscope, how we use all our tools. And if it's not good enough, the technology has to get there. So my honest opinion on this, although I would love to get it there, I'm kind of the skepticist that I'm like, I want it to become a little better before it gets there. But the trajectory shows that within our lifetime, within the next few years, we would see things that would be unfathomable to surgeons that would have done this for over 50 years. They would say, like, this is impossible. And I've seen work, like, in early stages, in a lab setting, that the surgeons look at this and they're like, wow, okay, let's take it to the surgery room. And going through that strenuous scope of, like, FDA clearance, it is a lot of work. As I said, it's a different thing to create something cool that can inform what the clinician should do, and a different thing to create something that the clinician would rely on to make a life and death decision. So yes, we're getting there, but not today, and most likely not tomorrow. But thank you for your question. This is great.
No, thank you.
Do we have any?
I see Christina also said something MRTK. So she must be using the Mixed Reality Toolkit. That is an excellent resource. We have been using it abundantly. Like Sophie Stelmach, that does all the eye work, and forget her name at Microsoft. She's by far one of the key people in MRTK. The work that these women have contributed, and the whole MRTK team, is remarkable. It's, as I said, it's like a clean canvas that they're experimenting. HoloLens is one of the tools out there to really experiment with XR and really open the wings to other platforms. And MRTK is an excellent platform to try out.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, I think we have a few on our end. So Alex, Kushin and I were actually interested in if there's any interesting user feedback from the SOP software in terms of user experience.
So the interesting thing about the SOPs, we didn't know how well they would be perceived, because changing the status quo in a lab is a big deal. Like people in the lab are very methodical. They always do something in a particular way. Changing their experiment, short circuits people sometimes. Hopefully not in our team. When they actually tried, they started creating the guides, and it's really remarkable. The reason why we didn't reinvent the wheel and we went with the dynamic 365 guides and instead saw how we could integrate that, it had a lot of R&D that Microsoft had put on how to address this. And the most remarkable thing was how reliable that technology was. So the thing that helped convert people to using these and now wanting to use a HoloLens is I don't need to fumble around to find an SOP, and I can have my SOP right there when I need it. So I don't need to, I know how to do an experiment, but I can always take a quick peek if I forget something as a refresher. So having that available and having that follow you, the amount of work that needs to go to that platform, everyone who has worked on that field would know, it is, the team has done remarkable work. Now, that doesn't mean that, I have a Santa's list of things that I would love to see on the guides. And if you use it, I'm sure you'll have these as well. Our lab is spoiled. It's spoiled in the sense that they're exposed to these platforms, and they're looking of ways to improve, and they're looking of potential shortcomings. So a technology cannot always be 100% solution to everything, and you cannot convince all not to use a traditional method. We had people actually that were using the printed out SOP and were looking up when they wanted the video because the video, the paper wouldn't play. So nobody wants in their bench to have laptops and all of that. They like their space to be clean. It couldn't get infected. You couldn't spill anything on it. So that were huge benefits of XR. And the interesting thing that we were piloting these with ventilators, with the guides. And one of the challenges that we saw was, you might have heard in the news that there were ventilator shortages and all of this, and how do we get ventilators here and there? The biggest challenge is, it is the way that our folks at ICU described to me, it's not whether we know what a ventilator does or not. That these people have logged tens of thousands of hours. So the de facto experts that are in the ICU are the real heroes. And the difference is, try to make an analogy, think of it like a musical instrument. So if you have a top-class pianist that is now called to play a different instrument, a different brand uses different setups, right? So try to ask them to play the guitar. They know music, but they haven't played the guitar. So asking them to change, and also play a little bit of piano here, a little bit of guitar here, a little bit of violin there, it's really hard in a time-critical point. So the shortages is also to find things that are complementary in skills. So one of the things that we were trying to do with guides was, how do we bring, our top-notch clinicians up to speed with reading the manual, but understanding that analogous language to bring all their knowledge and do it. So it has a lot in the field of, the SOPs and what is yet to be determined, but I could totally see the benefits of that hybrid approach. It's like something that was immobile that you now touch, and there's this slew of digital things hopping out of it. If you have to try it to see what it actually does.
Yeah, I wish I could get my hands on it to give it a try. That would be nice. I'll have to stop over at the lab. I think Chris had a question next, so I'd like to open the floor to him if he'd like to unmute.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. And great job, Alex. It's phenomenal to see what you've been doing with the headsets in general. Curious if it was Mesh then, the collaborative platform that you were using to put everybody together in a room, or was that something separate?
So what we actually use is a startup called Spatial. So we work with Agrawal, with Lowenstein and the folks they're in a New York City startup based in Soho. And we worked and partnered together with them a couple of years before the pandemic hit, when they were behind the curtain. And during the pandemic, I called Jacob and I said, we need to solve this healthcare stuff to meet more efficiently. What do you have? And we started talking and going back and forth, and they gave us access to their amazing platform. It's now free. You could download it and try it out. Works with the phones. It works with the XR devices. Spatial, it has a lot of really cool things. The thing I cannot get around is how uncanny my avatar is. It's frightening. I mean, it's great. It blinks. It shows me growling a little bit, it takes a little bit of use too. Like I don't have any fee, but it helps get the message across. Like whiteboarding, ideas with Olivia and Andrea when we couldn't be together. I'm like more old school. I like to eat it with people and collaborate. But it is these tools. So whether it's Spatial, whether it is Arthur or other amazing platforms that you can find. If you look around, you'll find remarkable things in different stores. I think they're really building the future of collaboration. Like, yes, Google Meet and Zoom and Teams is going to stick around and it's going to be fine. But if you really want to be on site and have that telepresence kind of feel and like appear as an avatar, I don't know, Chris, have you tried any of these platforms?
Yeah, so I'm familiar with Mesh. If you recall, I actually hooked you up with the first HoloLens 2, I think, that you got there from SphereGen. So
yes, using work with Ted.
Yeah, yep, 100%. So Microsoft's coming out with a platform like that called Mesh. I was just curious because you're using so many other things with them, if maybe you were previewing it. But I am familiar with Spatial, so that's awesome.
Yeah,
it's just great to see
so
that's coming together.
And
I agree.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I would say I agree. It's as you mentioned, Teams, Zoom, all that will be here for quite a while, but this really will be the future's next step. And it's great to see on the tip of that. So, great job.
To me, the greatest thing that the team, not Microsoft in general, but the mixed reality team is doing, the way that they're listening to feedback into the voices of all the developers is really remarkable. We've gone to work very closely together with the team from the early days. And we know a lot of the people personally, and I'm sure Chris or through Ted, you must have connected through a lot of people. Mesh is a very interesting tool of what they're bringing forward. So we used Spatial like years before they announced Mesh. But I'm very looking forward because Mesh is going to be like, it's a different thing to do it as the startup scale and a different thing where big tech companies step in and say, here's a full-blown solution that works perfectly with my device. What I would like to see is opening these platforms to everyone. Like one thing that Mesh hasn't addressed yet, it's still, infancy stages. It's not even live. It's like beta, and there's a lot of focus is how do you bring, like how many billion people are in the planet right now? How do you get them all in that room? Like Jennifer said, like, I'd love to try a HoloLens. I have one like right here. Like, yeah, I have one. We had like tens of HoloLenses. They cost like a significant amount. It's like how many people have a phone or a laptop? Like all of us, like we connected to the meeting. So trying to be inclusive is key. XR shouldn't be, only for the very nerdy or geeky or the people who paid like a substantial amount. And Chris, even if you make a major discount, you still need like a ton of these devices. The problem when we were working together with Microsoft is they couldn't build many enough during the pandemic. Maybe they were affected by that, like everyone else. So it's not like they had calendar invite, wait for the pandemic, make sure that I put my orders. Like it took the whole world by storm. But like all of these ideas, I think they're towards the right direction, including all the people. And I want to hear how people think about healthcare and what are the fields that they want to change. So like, even if you don't have a question, if you have a comment of a specific part that you would like to see, I would more than welcome and open it or share your story or what motivated you to start, in working in the healthcare space. I'd love to hear like, what is the single thing that got you even into to hear us today?
This is a fantastic talk, Alex. And we are very honored to, I think we're about to wrap it up as we are a little bit over time, if no one has more questions. And we are very honored to having you as our last speaker for our XR events. And I have to say, you mentioned XR is like, you hope it's not a nerdy thing. And I think it's no longer a nerdy thing. It's a new cool thing where people are talking about. And this is just my social observation. And yeah, I'm very looking forward to the day where like me and my friends, we can all experience XR. Because the only time I have experienced XR was a time like when I met you, like at the XR class. So yeah, very looking forward for that future.
Can I close with one comment?
Yes.
In the beginning, where XR started coming up, it would be people that are technically adept or very focused in the field that would get exposed. Now, having our clinicians experiencing this is the really, what's the tell that this is going to pick up, like that wave. When you see your clinicians coming back with questions, not just trying, coming back that long list of demands, and like demanding them to be ready tomorrow, this is when it's a really useful technology. So it is very important to build these tools and meet that demand. And I would always say, listen what they try to express. Don't just spoon feed them, but expose them to that technology, ask them to try it out, and ask them how this could help their, everyday life. It might look like a less important kind of part. It might not do surgery today, but it might help save thousands of people on things that we might not have even thought. Like simple things can play a key role if they change our workflows, our productivity, and our reliability to these devices. So thanks again. And thanks for the honor of having me to present to the audience here today.
Yeah, thank you very much.